This week's episode is sponsored by Change. Change is the #1 mentoring program that teaches you e-commerce from scratch. Change has a real community with real results. I have been working with Ryan for many years now and have attended many of his events and retreats across the world and got to meet members and the amazing community of like-minded people. Ryan works with a lot of big names in the business world, helping them build online businesses and e-commerce. Change offers personal one-on-one support, no experience needed, but like anything, this takes time and is not a get-rich-quick scheme. If you put the work in, you will get the results. E-commerce and online shopping is getting bigger and bigger. This is a great opportunity for anyone that is looking for financial freedom. For more information, go follow Ryan on Instagram at RyanJB, and he will guide you through the steps to help you get started and build a successful online business. You can now follow me on all my social media platforms to find out who my latest guest will be. And don't forget to click the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you're notified for when my next podcast goes live. Boom, we're on. And today's guest, we've got Lauren Conlin. Lauren, how are we?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Journalist, you've worked on some amazing stuff, but right now you're working on probably one of the biggest trials in the world, media-wise, anyway, with the hype, which is P. Diddy. You've been there every single day. I think we're on day 9 now. Is that correct?
Yes, we just finished up day 9, and I have been there every single day.
What is his actual charges?
He's being charged with 5 federal charges, 2 counts of human trafficking or sex trafficking, 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, and 1 count of racketeering. These are very, very serious charges. I mean, essentially, if he's convicted of all 5, he will never see the light of day.
And the minimum sentence is 15 years, is that correct?
15 years. Yeah, I mean, look, we'll get into it, but this Judge Arun Subramanian, I feel like if you're gonna, be charged with some federal crimes and you're gonna go to federal court, you want this judge. He's incredibly fair. I've never seen anything like it. Normally you kind of see judges favor the prosecution side, just unintentionally, but that's just kind of how it is. He is so incredibly just down the middle. I give him so much praise. So I can see him, with the sentencing, possibly weighing certain things. I mean, who knows? It's still early to tell, but yeah, 15 years.
Do you think he can work in favour for Diddy? A judge who is fair?
Do I think he would be in favor of him?
Yeah.
I don't. I think that's tough. I think that, you're allowed to speak as a defendant before you're being sentenced. Perhaps if he is convicted and he showed a lot of remorse or I mean, who knows? But I don't necessarily know if you could say that a judge would be in favor of the defendant,
Yeah. I've interviewed Big Gene, who was Diddy's bodyguard.
You interviewed Gene Deal?
Yeah, twice I've interviewed Gene.
I just saw him. He's like walking around the courthouse. I mean, he hasn't been subpoenaed, I'm assuming, because I've seen him walk in and listen to some of the testimony. I'm kind of wondering why they didn't subpoena him, but I'm so impressed. He's a good get.
Yeah, he's a good guy, but people question, why did they come out now? Why not 20 years ago when the shit was kind of... It's okay when they've got the lavish lifestyle with the parties. There'll be a lot of witnesses who haven't said a word. There'll be a lot of people who haven't said a word because obviously their involvement. But back then, I'd imagine a lot of stuff got swept under the carpet. But now there's rumours of Diddy. I'm just speculating, but there's a lot of rumours of Diddy being involved with Tupac murder, the Biggie murder, and with the way the guy is and the stories that are coming out, there is a possibility that he's a lot
creepier and weirder than first imagined, because when he's jumping about these award shows and listen, being the big man, and it does, a lot of people gravitate towards it, but a lot of people sell their souls to be involved with it, not realizing it does affect them later on in life. But for Big Gene, I'm surprised he's not called as a witness. Does that then question his credibility with what he's been saying over the years?
Yes, I mean, after, as I'm sitting here listening to you thinking about this, he may not be the best witness for the government because he's profited off of Diddy and the defense would destroy him. Or he's profited off of his time with him, through his channel, through his interviews, through his book. I believe he has a book, or maybe he's writing a book. I think he said that. Yeah, and I've seen some of his lives where he's like, "Oh, you want to know the answer to that? Buy my book." And I think that's something that the defense would just absolutely destroy him on the stand, because we've actually seen a couple people that have made money off of certain things that they're doing surrounding Diddy's charges. And yeah, I'm a layman. I'm not a lawyer. I would generally just, I would, I guess, think of myself as a juror watching this trial go down. I guess maybe I know a little bit more and I get to see a lot of the pre-trial stuff. So I have a little bit more context. But I would think if I heard this as a juror, I would be like, yeah, you want money. And so maybe, yeah, he wouldn't be the best. He would not be the best witness.
Yeah, this is the world we're living in now. Everything's all about views, everything's about attention, everything's about book sales. So a lot of people have played their cards beforehand because they're using people's names. But a lot of people are now getting in trouble. Look at the kind of Keefe D stuff with the Tupac murder, and he got charged. Like, just because it's a podcast you're saying it on, you're not free of a case that's not closed.
Exactly. We're finding now, I mean, at least in the US right now, there's another trial. It's huge. It's the Karen Reed trial out of Boston. I was covering that before. She's accused of backing over her cop boyfriend, Boston police officer boyfriend, with her Lexus SUV in this like drunken rage. And her defense is that she's being framed. They went to a party. She dropped him off at this other cop's house. And her defense is that she's being framed by all of these other cops who beat him up in the house, left him in the snow to die. And what's crazy is that this trial's been going on for 2 years, or basically there was a mistrial, the first time. Now they're retrying her. She's done so much media that these clips and what she said have actually come into the trial. And in my opinion, that is worse than any evidence that we've seen, things that she said. And you're sitting there like, oh my gosh, your lawyers are incredible. Why were you allowed to do this? And now, Keefe D, talking about him, he's getting, I think when he got arrested the first or second time, he's walking out of the house in cuffs, bragging that he was there when and it's like, you're still talking. You're literally still talking. What is your
Mhm.
problem? And then he acts surprised that, he can't get out on bond or bail. And I remember the second or third time that he had this bail hearing, they actually were like, this, I forget who it was. Somebody in the entertainment industry had literally paid the bond that he needed. And they're like, so are you planning to get out and just do this interview? Because you can't do that. It was so, I think this was, yeah, a couple months ago, but they just don't learn. It's so wild.
Yeah, but the social media and podcasts have made it that way. Everybody would sell their soul for views. But well, this is why a lot of people now are coming forward as well, because people just want to be part of the circus. When was Diddy's first ever accusations made about him? Do you know?
Well, I mean, okay, I think we should, I think that depends because there is a woman named Gina, and Gina has been brought up throughout this trial in a bunch of different witness testimonies here. And Gina is actually victim 4 that the government could not find. I don't know if you remember hearing this, but they were supposed to have victim 4 testify, and then all of a sudden she's not answering her phone. Her lawyer isn't picking up. Well, I can say not with certainty, but it's been speculated this is Gina. And during some of the before the jury comes in the morning, the lawyers start making they have conversations with the judge. They had evidentiary hearings and whatnot. And I did hear them say, Gina's not coming. And Gina was on a podcast in 2019 talking about Diddy abusing her, essentially, pulling her by the hair, kind of beating her. And I forget what podcast this was, but I remember seeing it a couple years ago and being like, wow, that's crazy. Officially, in 2023, November of 2023, that's when Cassie Ventura's lawsuit dropped, and that's when the floodgates opened. And we recently found out in court that HSI began their investigation into Diddy November 17th, 2023. So that's when the Homeland Security investigation officially started. And, I was thinking about this, why is it Homeland Security? Why is it not the FBI? You know what I'm saying? Like, why did they start this investigation? And I think that it has to do with the human trafficking. That's the sex trafficking, because that's what HSI does. And I mean, I know we'll probably get into this, but the sex trafficking charges, I mean, those would hold the most amount of jail time, the biggest sentences. And right now, I think those are going to be the two hardest charges to prove. However, we've only seen Cassie testify in terms of what I believe they're trying to prove with sex trafficking. We still need to see another Jane Doe testify. But yeah, I think that Cassie really seemed to open the floodgates here.
He must have been partying with thousands of people over the last 20, 30 years. Do you think a lot of people will be uneasy because they might get a call up for a witness? Or can people be called up and be charged with Diddy for being participants?
So that's a really good question, because we heard from two assistants this week, David James and George Kaplan. David James and George Kaplan both testified that they, at different times, were forced to buy drugs for Diddy, multiple times, actually. And then David James testified, about an incident that he had with D-Rock, his bodyguard, Diddy's bodyguard, Diddy, and David James, where they grabbed a bunch of guns and they were going after Suge Knight. So David James said on his stand, I have a proffer agreement. That's how I'm able to testify. And then before George Kaplan testified, we actually heard from the judge, and he said, do you think that your next witness, and we knew that was going to be Kaplan, is going to exercise his Fifth Amendment rights? We thought he was going to plead the Fifth for everything. We didn't know what was going on. And then when he got up to the stand, it turns out they were able to work out immunity within the last couple of hours. So I think the government is really doing everything they can to make these people feel safe to come forward. But I don't think these two, David James and George Kaplan, were nervous to come forward because of Sean Combs or Diddy. I think they were nervous about, being arrested at a certain point, because both of these witnesses, James, I mean, they shared laughs with Diddy on the stand. Diddy was laughing. And then, even George Kaplan said that he still uses some of the lessons and the work ethic that Diddy instilled in him to this day. And both assistants, when they were coming down off the witness stand, they kind of gave him like a head nod. And Diddy was just like, and for a minute, you're just like, why are we here? Like, why did you just waste? I mean, there was some corroboration, of course, setting up hotel rooms, the drug deals. We don't know how. I mean, I heard about an 8-ball at one point from David James, but he even admitted that he wasn't getting this 8-ball for Diddy. And so a lot of this is just, again, I get it, foundational, corroborating testimony, but it just felt a little gossipy. These two assistants in particular, they seemed to like Sean Combs. I mean, the government would say, was there a time when Sean Combs was angry with you? Yes. Okay, well, can you tell us about that? And essentially it was like, I got the wrong water bottle. He got in my face and said, you didn't listen to me. And I'm like, oh, okay, Diddy was mean to you? Like, let's get to it,
Yeah.
It was strange. Sorry, I went way off on your question. I
that's
just went on a
okay.
tangent.
But it just sounds then that they could be clutching at straws as well. Because how many times has people partied? An 8-ball is nothing. It's different if they're shipping hundreds of kilos or whatever. Because how in the UK we've got your own bit, you can charge with a bit of cocaine or whatever, but it's your own kind of bit where nothing will get done. So for an 8-ball to me is not really anything. But obviously with the mafia and RICO charges, and then people know they're on the charge sheet, they start then doing deals. Could that possibly be the case with Diddy? A lot of high profile celebrities start singing and going against Diddy to give them clearance for their own crimes in the past.
I mean, look, I want to also point out that the defense referenced the indictment when they were going through some evidence that was found at his house, including drugs. And they made a point to show us all and show the jury that they were able to destroy a large amount of the drugs they found, which means there was so little of these drugs that it didn't matter because they were found in like little bags inside a Gucci purse or in a box or something like that. There hasn't been that many drugs found on his property. But in terms of other celebrities, I think that's tough to say because look, in the opening statements, we kind of thought that the government was laying out what we're about to hear and who we're about to hear from. And they didn't, they kind of said you're going to hear from victim 1, 2, you're going to hear from these people, that people. We kind of expected them to drop some big names and they didn't. However, when we found out Kid Cudi was testifying, a lot of the reporters, we were like, oh, okay, there's going to be other big names, but we're just not going to know until the day before or maybe a couple days before. And it's so crazy because when court adjourns and the jury leaves, if you try to leave, you're going to miss out on what they're discussing and what the judge is saying in terms of these witnesses. But, LeBron James, he was supposed to co-host or be an honorary co-chair of the Met Gala this year. And it was on the first day of Diddy's jury selection. And LeBron James canceled his appearance because of a knee. Excuse me, sorry. LeBron James canceled his appearance because of this knee injury. And he's had this injury for a long time. And, I'm thinking to myself, something's not right here. What if he got subpoenaed and he's like, oh man, I need to be out of New York right now? I kept thinking. So while I don't necessarily feel like any other celebrities were part of his criminal enterprise per se, or alleged criminal enterprise, I do feel like they knew maybe some things that were going on. And I just feel like his business associates are going to be the ones that, need to either flip for the government or get a lawyer or get a proffer.
Because it's the biggest celebrities on the planet. Now, LeBron James, there is a video of him saying there's no party like a Diddy party. Like anyone who supported it, it doesn't look good. It's always if they're part of some big club. So I thought there would be a lot more names through under the radar, through under the bus. But even with the drug things, it just seemed personal. That I'm not really asked about that. There's not really much there to go against him with that. But it's the names, it's the Ashton Kutchers, it's the Jay-Z's, it's the Will Smith. But I think he says he's never been to a Diddy party to try and cover his own ass. So I don't
Did
know.
hear Will Smith's name. We heard that Diddy used Will Smith's studio in Miami when he was around. So maybe Will Smith didn't go to the parties, but he definitely knows Diddy and lets Diddy use his studio in Miami. And I mean, we've heard celebrity names, James. Like I just don't know what to make of it. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the last big celebrity name that really shocked me was Usher when Dawn Richard testified that they were at a pretty small dinner and Diddy punched Cassie in the stomach and Usher was there. And look, I don't know if Usher saw this with his own eyes and said nothing, but the group she described was small enough and she saw it and other people saw it. So I could speculate that Usher saw it. And then he just, he shrugs it off. And I guess so, because it's Sean Combs. I mean, what are you going to do? But still, to think that a lot of people knew what was going on and the fact that Cassie was being thrown around like a rag doll and abused like this, that's pretty gross. However, again, no one should be treated like that. Nobody. And he should have gone to jail for what he did at the Intercontinental. He should have gone to jail for that. But the LAPD came out and said the statute is up. And that's unfortunate. I have a hard time at this moment in time, week 2, thinking that, that these sex charges are black and white. It's an open and shut thing. I have a hard time thinking that 12 people are going to agree that he's guilty of sex trafficking, namely Cassie Ventura.
Because obviously Cassie's statement and stuff, which we'll get into, she was cross-examined And some of the messages don't look good from Cassie when she's saying she doesn't want the freak-offs to end. And listen, we all know now about trauma bonding and Stockholm syndrome and other stuff like that. But the people who I've interviewed against about Diddy, they have always said there's always darkness around this man. Even when he started, there was a charity basketball game many years ago and people died. You've got Biggie death, you've got Tupac death. People say he was trying to be like Tupac. Bear in mind, he was just a manager. And then Suge Knight says it was all up in the videos, dancing, and there's always been death and bad stuff around this man. Is that just a coincidence? Or is he actually so bad that he's got away with so much that now it's catching up with him? Because now we know with all the cameras in rooms and putting people in compromised positions, stuff like Epstein kind of things where they're bribing each other. But it just all seems dark. And why did it take so long? 2023, 30 years this man's been in this industry to then for charges to come forward. Listen, he's still got support as well. People are saying he's a scapegoat. He's been thrown under the bus so other people can get off. But why so long has it took for him to get charges?
I mean, I feel like a lot of people were living in this culture of fear. And Diddy, from what I've learned, and I'm only really right now speaking about what I've learned in court because I feel like that's what matters right now. And I think that's important for people to understand as well. You can read whatever you want in the media. You can go back and listen to all these podcasts, but just know that the jurors aren't seeing any of this. The jurors are not weighing this or factoring this into anything they're hearing. But we're hearing that Diddy, he while he did sort of create this culture of fear, he also was very inspiring to a lot of these people. He seemed to be very charming, very charismatic, and I can kind of almost see it in his demeanor with his lawyers. And I gotta say, James, I feel like this man is going crazy inside because he's so used to being in control and controlling all of the situations. You can almost see him when his lawyers are doing cross examinations. He's looking at them, he's leaning back like this, and he's kind of like, all right, you better get this done for me. You better make this person, impeach this person or make them look bad. But no, I think it's the whole thing now. People just want one person to come forward and then they feel safe. And like I said, it sounds like Diddy is really not a good guy. He's really a bad guy. I'm not saying it sounds like it. We've seen it with our own eyes. We really have. But on the other hand, some of this is a little bit targeted. I will be open and honest in saying that. The transportation to engage in prostitution charges, I think that's the easiest conviction right there. We've already heard from escorts. Actually, the two we heard from, they did not travel for Diddy at all. But Cassie told us that there was travel across, different cities and even countries between certain escorts, and they would bring them over with them to wherever they were. So if we see the receipts for that, and if we hear from those escorts, which I think we will, those will be just super easy to get the conviction. But that's what I feel like is really just they added those charges to get the conviction. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like, and this sounds horrible, but I feel like a lot of men do that. They fly in, we're going to Miami for a work thing. Let me fly in some of my girls from New York City that I know party, women of the night, whatever you want to call them. And I'm sure I'll get shade for this, but I just feel like it's a lot of people do that. And Diddy, kind of got targeted for that. However, he is not a good guy. He's done a lot of bad stuff. So yeah, like maybe they need to get something on him for this jail time,
So I'm not asked about that, like the orgies and the sex parties, and nobody cares. Like I say, the prostitution, like you says, is an exchange now. A lot of these girls, just because they're not on websites asking for money, as soon as you're jumping on a free flight and going to parties and drinking and drugs and having sex, you're still a prostitute basically because you're exchanging something. And I think Dan Bilzerian would be the first to admit that as well, that some of these girls that they crave fame, they crave attention, they're willing to sell their souls to be part of something that's so dark, but yet they think it's so normalised now with so much porn and the majority of the girls doing OnlyFans in America, I think from the ages of 18 to 24, there's 10% of young girls doing OnlyFans. So we've normalised selling yourself short. But is that a crime? I don't think it is. If you're willing to participate in these sex parties, and if you're drinking and taking drugs willingly, I don't see how that's a crime. I don't see where they're trying to get charges for that, because it happens every day all around the world.
Yes, it does. I mean, prostitution is illegal in most states, and I think that, that, but you're right. These sex workers or escorts, they are willingly getting on a plane, getting paid for their services. It's by choice, and it's commercial sex trafficking. And Cassie Ventura, who I believe they are trying to prove was sex trafficked. I mean, she was not paid. However, the argument is sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. And you could definitely argue that Cassie was coerced based on the evidence that we've seen. But this is going to be entirely up to the jury because, as you pointed out, we are shown emails of Cassie saying that she never wants freakoffs to end. But then again, we also are seeing that Cassie was threatened. I mean, we saw an email she sent her mother in 2011 or 2012 that said threats and said, Sean's trying to hurt me. He's threatening to hurt me, or he's threatening to extort me and release these sex tapes if we don't give $20,000. I mean, she didn't write this, but we found out in court that Cassie's very, her parents, they lived a modest life. They actually had to take out a second mortgage and pay Diddy this 20 grand that he demanded to not release these freak-off tapes. He ended up giving it back, but that's going to be up for the jury to decide. Is that extortion going along with the RICO charges in the indictment, or he gave it back? Was he just trying to mess with them? I think it's going to just come down to the jury, which obviously, that sounds stupid to say because of course it does. But I just mean there are arguments for all of
Both
this.
sides.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's not black and white. And that's what's just so crazy about this, being in the courtroom and hearing all of this.
Yeah, that's bad. The making threats and the blackmail to do this, or you'll be exposed, give me this money. Like, that's bad. That's guilty for me. That's bad. So for people willingly who are maybe just thinking it's a bit of fun weekend away with some rich guys, celebrities, and doing bad stuff, it's down to them. But if you're threatened, if you're saying I'll release this video or do this, then that's different. That's extorting someone. That's blackmailing someone to get your own gain. But it'll be interesting how it plays out. How was day one at court? How was Diddy's presence walking in? Because obviously he's not dyeing his hair anymore. He's not dyeing his beard. He looks very grey. Someone actually posted a video. I don't know if you've ever seen Life with Eddie Murphy and Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence, and when they're older, and somebody tagged Diddy in, and I did laugh at that. But it obviously will be a shell of a man, like you say. He's not in control, so that'll be killing him inside. He'll be used to being the leader, bossing everyone around. But how was his presence on day one?
Yes, just really quick, I just want to go back to the threats and the extortion thing. We didn't see Diddy say any of that, just FYI. We just saw Cassie's email to her mom claiming that. So just keep that in mind. We didn't see anything that Diddy wrote to her. I just want to point that out. It was Cassie saying that, her words. But yes, Diddy.
Well, that changes it then. If Diddy's not said it personally, because that's then only hearsay between her and her mum. Anybody can write to their mum or their partner or whoever. So he's got a big case there to defend with him not saying it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's like we see this. I believe Cassie. I mean, it lines up with everything else she's said and everything else she's gone through. But yeah, it's again, it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be, who do you believe? Who's got, yeah. So no, Diddy every day, it's pretty surprising. He walks in really good spirits. I think from day one up until day 9, I think it was day 8, I had said that, or no, maybe it was day 7. He turned around to the public section of the courtroom and he gave like these heart, and this one lady on the end, she was like giving him this heart back, like really, really, really engaged with him. But he looks like a Menendez brother to me in these crew neck sweaters with the, the little collar, and it's really giving to me Eric and Lyle Menendez, trying to make him look so innocent. And we've got this once fashion icon that really, I mean, I think it was the other day I was sitting there just in disbelief. Like, am I looking at this guy in every single day, a crew neck sweater and khakis? It's totally wild. And yeah, he is all gray hair. One of the assistants actually said that he would set up just for men in his bathroom. So I'm sure, yeah, it didn't take long for Diddy to go gray when he didn't have access to his hair dye. But he doesn't look as thin as everybody thinks he looks. I mean, he looks, I don't know, maybe a little thinner, but he kind of looks the same. Not emaciated like I was reading at first, or when he was first photoed in the courtroom.
But that shows me then that's the man who thinks he's got a chance of winning, unless he's just so blatantly egotistic that that's just his character, no matter if it's good or bad in life. But with that presence, but it's everybody was against Diddy. 99% of the world over the last couple of years, with the elevator video and Cassie getting beaten and the videos like Justin Bieber as a kid, like, it doesn't look good, but it does change fast. And it only takes a couple of bad witnesses or a couple of good bits of good evidence that Diddy has for the tables to turn again, and he starts getting more support. Because people, the world and people, they change their mind so quick. And if it's all against Diddy, it only takes... I've seen it with Cassie's when she was getting cross-examined. I've seen it when she says that she was participating and she didn't want freakoffs to end. How then people say he's being set up, they're all for his money. Like, it does turn fast.
Yeah, and I felt so bad for Cassie because, as a female, as a woman, I mean, the things that I might have said to a man, or a man I was dating, or, an older man I was dating, especially, like, you don't mean everything you say. You want to be accepted. You want to, you're in a certain mindset when you're younger, and you don't, like, you've read that. You don't actually fully come into your brain, into yourself, until you're 26 years old. So I can't even imagine if you showed text messages I sent to a man when I was 21 and a man was older. And so you really feel horrible for her. And we heard testimony that he wanted to mold her. And at one point it was overheard by an assistant that Diddy said, "I've got Cassie right where I want her." You hear all of this, and then you see how badly Cassie wants to be with him. She did these freak offs, or she testified that she did this, and we even saw an email. She cherished the time they had alone after, because she would do these freak offs for him. He would watch her with an escort, and then she said they would go into another room and do their own thing for a while. And then after a while, Diddy didn't have time for that anymore. He didn't have time to be with her alone. And she sent this email kind of saying, "Well, I feel like you're just using me, so to speak." And that was actually used for the defense, because they said, "Well, Miss Ventura, you said that you didn't have, the words. You were so young. You didn't know how to express yourself and say all of this to him. But it looks like you're expressing yourself right here. And it wasn't that you didn't want to do the freak offs. It was that you wanted to do the freak offs, or you were fine with it, but only if, you had your time with Mr. Combs after." And, she, again, it was tough, because you understand where she's coming from as a female, but does that equate to a federal crime? And I feel awful saying this, because it's just so clear that he's not a good guy. He's not. I'm not trying to help the guy out, but I really respect the Constitution, and you can't just go throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks, because, this is a bad guy and he's done some bad things, and his statute is up for a lot of his other crimes. So it's actually just really conflicting, James. It really is. It's so hard.
Yeah, you've got to stay open-minded to it all. You've got to sit in the fence till you actually hear everything. But if she's feeling part of his, if she loved him, I believe they loved each other, but she was very young, 19, I believe, when they met. But did she feel part of feeling loved? Because I interviewed a girl, Lauren, who was doing OnlyFans now. She was getting abused at 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. See, when the man wasn't abusing her, she thought that he didn't love her anymore. So it's kind of like the stuff with Cassie, and I'm not, like I say, I don't have all the answers, but when she's doing these parties and being abused and these men are peeing in her mouth, and once that all stops, she's then saying, am I just being used? So it's hard, like you say, the brain isn't fully functioning, but when you're cooperating, when you're willingly doing it, it is difficult, and there is a case for Diddy, and that's the thing, and he'll have the best of lawyers involved in that and picking up any small little thing to then run with that. So day one at the trial, who was the main witnesses? Was Cassie up for on day one, or was that day 3 or 4 she came?
So Cassie was day 2. The first day was Israel Flores. He was a security guard at the Intercontinental who kind of broke up the fight in the hallway. And then we heard from Daniel Phillip, who was an escort that they used. So, and, Daniel Phillip, that's when Diddy's daughters left the courtroom, because it was some graphic. I mean, God, day 1, it was like out of the gates. You're like, oh my goodness, it was just wild. I was like not ready for it. I mean, and I feel like there's going to be a few more days like that. The first week, it was bad, especially with him, with Cassie, and yeah. I mean, just sitting there, you feel really weird just hearing about the bizarre sexual things that Diddy liked to do behind closed doors. And I know that it's part of the corroboration, but you're just like, I didn't need to know that. I didn't. I mean, if I can say something if you want, am I allowed to? Or
Yeah, say anything you want, yeah.
I mean, we learned through Daniel Phillip, his testimony on the first day, or maybe, yeah, it was the first day, because he finished the second day, but that Cassie would take his semen and rub it on Diddy's nipples, and this was Diddy's request. And you're just like, what? Like, I don't need to know this. I mean, that's so yeah. Anyway, yeah. Yep. I'm like turning red. Sorry. I know.
No, that's pretty gay. Is Diddy gay? Was he sleeping with these men, or did he? Because what's that word? I actually wrote down the word, like it's not a disease, but there's a word for it, that he enjoyed watching his partner having sex.
I think a lot of us are waiting. I mean, we heard all of the homosexual tendencies. We saw some of these civil suits before. So I know I was sitting there in court waiting to hear about Diddy, in a homosexual position here. And what is really interesting is what we heard from Daniel Phillip was that he actually walked in at Cassie's apartment. He walked in where Cassie was performing, I believe it was oral on Diddy, and another male escort was having sex with her. And Daniel Phillip is kind of in the corner watching this all go down. And then he hears Diddy get angry because he says that the male escort that is with Cassie is looking him in the eye. And he's like, motherfucker, don't look me in the eye. And he's like, having sex. He's like, I'm not. And he's like, and then all of a sudden he throws Cassie off and he's like, don't look me in the eye. And he gets really upset. And this is when Cassie ran to the corner of the room, and I'm telling my husband this, and my husband's like, yeah, because he is ashamed to be gay. So he doesn't want to be gay, in front of these escorts and this and that. And I'm like, is that what you think, really? Because I just feel like I don't know. We haven't heard of anyone that has, on the stand yet. Again, I know it's week 2, but no one said that he enjoyed the company of men yet. I just don't know if it's too early, or I don't know if he wouldn't trust these escorts to not share. It's confusing. But he got mad when he thought another man was looking him in the eye. So
How accurate is escorts, though? How much word can you actually take from them because of their job? Would they not be discredited because they were escorts?
No, the escorts definitely have credibility. I mean, they weren't just, I shouldn't say just escorts, that's offensive, but they had other jobs in life. And the 2 that we heard from so far, they weren't actually escorts. One guy, he managed a male review show, which is kind of like strippers for women in Times Square. And he got a call from his boss, and they wanted him to go strip for a bachelorette party, which turned out to be Cassie. He had no intention of having sex or selling sex for money. And then the other escort we heard from, the Punisher, he was in another. I know, it's crazy. And actually, I really like the Punisher. The Punisher came off so credible. I mean, so just together. But he also described. He had a website called thepunisher.com. He worked for Hunkamania is what it's called, and now he's actually a managing partner. And again, they're strippers. They're stripper services. So they had no intention of going there and having sex. This just kind of happened. And then Cassie would say, you know, can I call you again? Can I text you again? And they said yes. So that's what we've heard so far. We haven't actually heard like someone that was from Cowboys and Angels, which is an actual escort service that Cassie and Diddy used, or that's what we've heard so far. But yes, I think, you know, we'll see when someone who is strictly an escort gets on the stand if they are credible, if they're not. I mean, we have yet to say that.
When I interviewed Big Gene, he says Diddy was actually okay, stable, but the drugs kinda he lost himself. Do you think with the parties he's just got seedier and seedier? It's like people who've got so much money, they've got so much power. They want the power kind of took away. I've interviewed like sex workers who like dress judges up and people in high places as babies, and it's creepy stuff. Do you think it's just got his life has just got seedier and seedier as it went on, or do you always think he was like that?
That's a really good question. I mean, we have learned that Sean Combs is an addict. Look, I mean, he is a drug addict. You know, clearly maybe not now, but he was a drug addict and he was addicted to opioids. And we heard, James, that he overdosed. I believe it was 2012. I remember Cassie was asked about this overdose. He overdosed after a party at the Playboy Mansion. And the year they said, do you remember when he overdosed? And she said, was that the year Whitney Houston died? That was like her way of trying to remember. And they're like, yes. And so I think it was 2012. But not only that, he is an addict because when we heard from the HSI agent, and I found this to be so weird, the HSI agent who raided his hotel at the Park Hyatt in New York in September of 2024, when he was arrested, they found baby oil, Astroglide, MDMA, ketamine, $9,000 cash. This is in his hotel room. And when he was trying to get out on bond, you know, between September and now before the trial, his lawyers had said, look, my client flew to New York in anticipation of being arrested. He's cooperating. He's this, he's that. And I'm like, wait a minute. You're telling me he's so addicted to freak-offs and sex? If this is true, he knew he was going to be arrested and he has all his freak-off supplies, including drugs? Because everybody's testified that during these freak-offs, I mean, these drugs, they enhance your sexuality, MDMA. They make you euphoric. You lose all inhibitions. And he's so addicted that he knows his house has already been raided. His house was raided months before all of his homes. He can't help himself. I mean, that is addiction, is it not? That like blew my mind, James. I was just like, so this man, I don't have proof, but it sounds like he's always been dark. And hearing about his sexual appetite and just the deviance that he exhibited behind closed doors. I mean, what happened to him as a kid? Which of his mom's boyfriends molested him? And sorry if that sounds I don't know this. I don't know if he was abused. That's a horrible thing to say. But
yeah, no, I actually know. Well, Big Gene says when his mum, or someone says when his mum was a prostitute, and Diddy used to watch his mum having sex with her clients.
Okay, I didn't know that. So this all makes sense to me because, I mean, something happened to this guy where he wants to exert this odd power sexually. We've heard stories, right, where he got robbed at a store when he was 11, and his mom said, "Don't come back until you kick all their asses," or whatever. His mom is, without pointing all the fingers at her because you are your own person. I do feel like his mom maybe kind of gave him this type of mindset. I mean, I hate to, as a parent myself, I hate to think that we're responsible for everything that our children do, but we are slightly, yeah. So it's.
But his dad was a gangster also. I think he was connected to Frank Lucas. back in the 70s and 80s.
His mom lied about how his dad died, I guess. That was another thing. Like, he didn't know that his dad was connected to some of these, gangs until much later in life.
So he must have been very confused. And like you say, it's not to feel sorry for him, but it's to understand what he actually went through as a kid. Because now you'll see, I think 1/3 in people who's been abused become abusers themselves.
Yes, you're so right, James. You're so right. That is very common.
What about the baby oil? Like, was there drugs in the baby oil? Like, is this just something silly? Like, how deep does this go?
At this point, I would have thought that it would have been revealed to us that if there was GHB in the baby oil, we would know because we've seen evidence of crates of baby oil seized, and in many different photos. We've heard about assistants picking up baby oil. We've just heard everything. Cassie say we had to rub baby oil on each other, all this stuff. But not once have I heard that they had to pick up baby oil and like deliver it to somebody to, you know what I mean? Like, I have a hard time believing that there was GHB in all of this baby oil because I just don't know how they would manage that. Especially because again, it's early, but I haven't seen GHB seized from any of Diddy's homes yet, or anything like that on the evidence list that we've seen. So I think that the baby oil is just strictly corroboration to alleged sex crimes. But they've really, in my opinion, overdone the baby oil talk. I mean, it hasn't been as bad, but I think it was maybe the second day they had a baby oil sidebar because the line of questioning was so focused on the baby oil to Cassie that I was just like, what are we doing here? What does this matter? I mean, and then I think it was 10 a year ago. She's like, objection, like asked and answered about the damn baby oil. They're like, how many bottles did you go through for a freak off? And Cassie would say 10. Well, how big were the bottles? This big. Well, what brand was it? Johnson and Johnson. And what would you? And you're like, okay, we get it, we get it, we get it. Why, why? So they are doing something with this, and if it's anything less or equal to corroboration at the end of this trial, I'm gonna be like, okay, that wasn't necessary.
That's a different ballgame. If he's putting drugs in baby oil without people's permission, then he's guilty. He's done. But if there's nothing to it, because social media, it had a field day with the baby oil conspiracies, and that's the thing about social media. Everybody has an opinion now, but it's actually until the court case comes out where you think, oh, well, that was bollocks. What about Homeland Security? Did they find any CCTV whatsoever
No,
when
I
they
mean,
raided
so
his
far,
house?
no. So far, we don't know what they found on Diddy's devices at all, or what devices they have of his, because everything we've seen so far, as far as text messages, and there were still videos shown of a freak off or Cassie right before a freak off with an escort and Diddy. These were sealed to just the jury, and these all came from Cassie's devices. Additionally, we heard from an HSI forensics expert that talked about how he was able to extract data from 3 of Cassie's devices. Now, there was a mention that on one of her devices, there was a guest user login and a Frank Black login, which is Diddy's alias that he uses.
Yeah, because Biggie used to use the name Frank White.
Oh yeah, and they said he used Frank White in a hotel as well a couple times. But yeah, so Cassie, she gave consent to search. They didn't need a search warrant, but for the Frank Black, they said they had to get a search warrant for that. Now we haven't heard what they've extracted from Frank Black, or if anything. But again, we've kind of only seen, text messages and whatnot from Cassie's devices. I think I don't, it's interesting too, because I keep hearing these little things like David James, the assistant. He testified that, he walked into Diddy's office the day after a New Year's party, and Diddy was reviewing footage from the party. And then he made a comment like, oh, Mr. Combs always recorded his parties. So I'm just writing this down like, oh, are we going to see more of that? And no one seems to be talking about that, or no one seems to have picked up on that. Well, if he recorded all of his parties, do they have this? I mean, there has to be more, right? There has to be more than what we're hearing or what we're seeing. or not. I don't know. I really don't know.
Sorry, Steph, you sent that word. He sent the word there. Voyeur something. Send that word again, Steph. That there's a word for Diddy. It was
Voyeurism. Voyeurism.
voyeurism. Yes.
Well, he talked about that with Cassie about swinging. He said, "Oh, it's voyeurism." And she said, "Oh, I wasn't interested." He was talking about how he wanted to swing and this and that, and I just wanted to be with him. And this again, the defense has, I got to give them credit where credit is due, because she said she had no interest in seeing him with other women. She didn't want to be a part of that. And I believe her on the stand. And then, of course, they're able to elicit a text message she sent him, very, very long ago when she was younger, where she said, and I'm paraphrasing, but she was fantasizing about seeing him with another woman, which, is part of his whole voyeurism thing. But yeah, again, I just go back to just feeling so bad for her, because of course, as females, sometimes we placate to men because we want their love and affection, and that's just how it is, unfortunately.
But it's okay wanting love and affection and not wanting your partner to be with anybody else. But participating, having orgies, rubbing semen on your man's nipples, that's a different ballgame, Lauren. That's dark, no matter what. No matter if you felt you were pressured or blackmailed or whatever, there must have been plenty of opportunities for Cassie to leave also.
I mean, I struggle with that because I always hear that, well, why didn't she leave? She should have left. Well, we heard from an expert, Dr. Don Hughes, the trauma expert. And in the US, I would say, to people that follow a lot of these trials, she doesn't have the greatest reputation in terms of, she testified in Depp v. Heard, and they really seem to impeach her on a few things. She testified in the R. Kelly trial, but she essentially makes her living, or 60% of her living, testifying in these trials, and she doesn't actually, treat the survivors, which again, it's fine. You can generalize a lot of this because Dr. Don Hughes has a lot of experience in this. But and that's where I go back to the whole, it's not as easy as just leaving, because this man, for Cassie anyway, he controlled her career. She was signed with Bad Boy, and you see how successful he is. You see how much power he has. You see that he beat the crap out of her. That is just certain. That happened. We saw it with our own eyes, and now we've heard so many different witnesses say the same thing, that he beat her and he threatened her, allegedly. We heard from Cassie at one point that after an argument in Cannes in France, after the film festival, on the way home, on the flight home, he made her watch a freak-off video, kind of like blackmail, and other people were around. He played it the whole time, and that is a threat right there. So I truly, I don't blame her for not being able to leave, especially, the age that she was. So I definitely, I can't really speak to that.
Yeah.
Do you think he was using these videos to then keep people in line?
Yeah, I do. I do think that I mean, there's a couple occasions where that assistant talked about him watching these videos from the party, and the assistant was on ecstasy, and this guy's a pretty buttoned up guy, and he said that Diddy said to him, I'm going to keep this just in case. And one of the escorts, when Diddy finally showed his face, because at first he wouldn't show his face, you saw he would wear a bandana, or he would wear, something that would just cover or his eyes would only be visible. And the escort said, when he finally showed his face, he's like, "Let me see your license." And he took a picture of his license and he said, "Just in case I need this," which all of these people perceived as threats. And when you've got a guy like Sean Combs, who seems to have the world at his fingertips, and a whole staff, of course they're scared. Of course they're nervous.
But is that threats, or is that not a threat, but to say don't speak out and make accusations about what you've seen here, or I will also show what you've done, where he's trying to protect himself? I'm not trying to stick up for him, but I'm just trying to look at it from all angles, because I would have imagined, like I say, getting semen rubbed in your nipples, he's not wanting that to go anywhere. So he's just got a bit of security to say, well, if you release this, I can release this, like a bit of leverage. What about people who signed NDAs? How can they then, can they still speak at court with signing an NDA? How does that work?
Yeah. We saw Cassie's former best friend, Carrie Morgan, who we found out while she was on the stand, she signed an NDA in 2018. And we had learned previously through Cassie's testimony that this incident in 2018 between Carrie Morgan, Cassie, and Diddy ended this 17-year friendship. Carrie and Cassie were at Cassie's house, and Diddy busted through the door and said, who is she cheating with? I guess Cassie was in the bathroom, but Diddy grabbed her friend, Carrie Morgan, by the neck and then smacked her over the head with a wooden hanger, like pretty hard. Or so Carrie says, and so Cassie says. And, when Cassie was on the stand, they said, and it turns out Carrie Morgan, she sued you guys. And Cassie, you paid her out. And Cassie's like, yeah. And they're like, well, why would this happen? You guys weren't together. You said that you weren't together, blah, blah, blah. Well, when Carrie gets up to the stand, we learn a lot more. We see some context. And actually, the defense was able to get Carrie to say that Cassie was cheating on Diddy in 2018 with her now husband, the trainer, Alex Fine. And so I thought that was a moment where it was once or twice they got her to kind of say Cassie was cheating, where Cassie was like, we were on again, off again. We were not together. So there seems to be a lot of confusion around this. And this also happened with Kid Cudi, but we'll get to that. But it turns out that Carrie Morgan said, look, our friendship ended because after this incident, I went to urgent care. I was very upset. Cassie took Diddy's side, acted like it wasn't a big deal. Carrie contacted a lawyer, and then Cassie had this meeting with her at a pizza place, and she said, look, let's just put this behind us. Let's sign an NDA, and we will give you, or Sean will give you $30,000. And she took it, and she signed the NDA. So, and then we, Jonathan Odie, the escort we heard about that Diddy paid off. I mean, Cassie, I'm sure we're going to hear from him, but Cassie said she didn't know about this payoff or the NDA. If you look online, the NDA was released by, I believe, the Daily Mail. But she said Jonathan Odie appeared to be holding up his cell phone during a freak off, and she kind of freaked out, and she told Diddy. And Diddy said, I'll take care of it. But she claimed she didn't know anything else that happened after that.
See the freak offs? Obviously, there was a lot of high profile celebrities there, the Kardashians and Ushers. Was it just a party at the start? Because I believe there was also kids there. And then I think the kids get told to leave. And then is that when all the madness started? Because it's like people would get photos. There's a man here called Jimmy Savile, one of the most prolific sex cases, but there's people would have had photos with him. It doesn't mean they were participating with him. Same as Epstein, there would have been people got photos and stuff. It doesn't mean you're bad or you're doing the stuff that they're doing. Is there a lot of people at these parties who'd have been unaware? And like I say, if I got offered to that party 2 or 3 years ago, I would have went because it's high profile names. I'm thinking podcast guests, but before you know it, 3 years later, you're a swinging, you're getting semen rubbed in your nipples. But you're like, I'm just there to do a business. But there must be a lot of people who can get caught in the crossfire that actually did not have a clue what was going on.
Yes, and I think what's important to differentiate is that so far, week 2, freak offs are completely different than a quote Diddy party. We haven't really heard much about these parties. I mean, we heard about a New Year's Eve party a few times, and this party, Cassie would be very jealous because she wasn't allowed to go because I guess Kim Porter would always go. But freak offs were specific events at either hotels or his house that just involved one of his women, Cassie, is all we've heard right now. I'm pretty sure we're going to hear from Jane. We probably were supposed to hear from Gina and an escort. So really, there was only 3 or 4 people involved. And so this is not necessarily a Diddy party. I mean, I'm sure we're going to I'm not sure, but if I had to just guess because of some of these civil suits, I would think that other people will come forward and say, I was working at a Diddy party and he offered me XYZ to participate in this. We just haven't heard of that yet. So right now, I think you're right. It's like you can go to a Diddy party, you can leave at 11, you can leave at 12 and have no idea about what was happening. But I do feel like, even though we haven't seen all these drugs seized, we saw that, and he had an eyedropper and there's MDA in the eyedropper. So it's like, what people are, they're getting high and not even knowing. I mean, that could be a thing, but it just, we haven't heard it yet. So we'll see.
And what about the 20 million that Cassie took off of Diddy a few years ago, where she made the claims and then they've got a settlement before? Like, how can she then take the stand and speak out against him if there was already a settlement? How does it all work? I don't know the American law.
Yeah, so that was a civil suit, and this is a federal criminal trial, which honestly, if you ask me, I think that actually adds to Cassie's credibility, and maybe that's an unpopular opinion, but it's like she already got her $20 million, and what she endured on the stand, being 8.5 months pregnant, was and again, in my opinion, so traumatic and so humiliating, okay? To have to read text messages that were so graphic, to have to just talk about what she felt like was the darkest times of her life, to watch her get the shit kicked out of her on camera. I mean, it's just, why would you do that? You got a payment, the government asked her to participate in this, and she said yes. And she didn't necessarily have to. She could have pled the fifth. I mean, that's her right. So I think, that might add to her credibility, but also we heard, which I thought was a big bombshell, nobody knew, but she's about to get a $10 million settlement from the Intercontinental Hotel as well.
Why was that so hush hush and the video never came out for like 10 years later? Why, when she get beaten at the elevator, why did that get swept under the carpet? Why was he not charged then? Because apparently the police knew about that.
Well, that's what's interesting here is that the security guard that we heard from, Israel Flores, he took video of this, right? He took video of it. He said he took video to go home and show his wife. He showed a couple other employees. And I have a feeling we're going to hear from more people that worked there, because Israel Flores said he was offered like a stack of money by Diddy. And he's like, no, I don't want your money. Well, somebody took the money, because he testified when he went to go back to look at the video, it was gone. It was wiped from the system. So somebody wiped it. I don't know. Did he? I mean, again, I don't know enough, but you're right. How was this kept a secret for so long? And I don't know if the cops were called, because Israel Flores said he asked Cassie, should I call the police? He noticed that she had a purple eye. And Cassie's like, no, I just want to go home. And if the victim doesn't want to call the police, what are you going to do? Call them anyway with no victim? You don't have anyone to, say what happened, etc. So the police showed up later at Cassie's house because a neighbor called the police because Diddy was banging on her door with a hammer. And that's why the police were called. But again, Cassie didn't give her name. She claimed she didn't have her ID. And this is per the testimony of Carrie Morgan. And this is all the same day as the Intercontinental. So there are still a lot of questions there, James.
That video puts so much weight against Diddy. Without that video, there's not really much to show. It's all just hearsay and accusations and he says, she says. But that video was so important, I believe, for everything. And like I say, we've heard getting the 20 million, the settlement. With it is Alex Fine. Diddy paid for him to train Cassie, and then they started a relationship who she now has 3 kids with. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And at one point he was demanding money back. Like he wanted the money back that he paid the trainer for, he wanted it from Cassie. It's kind of wild how he seems to do that with her. He gets in these moods and he's like, pay me this money. So we definitely saw an exchange between the two of them about that.
And what was day 5 like? Day 4, day 5 after Cassie? Who came in after that?
Well, so Cassie, oh my gosh. I mean, she took 4 days on the stand, James. It was long. So she finally finished, I believe it was last Friday. And then after that, we saw the HSI agent, who's a female. She was the one that took the photos at the hotel when they arrested Diddy. And then we saw Dawn Richard. And, I felt really bad for Dawn Richard, to be honest. She tried, and I believe her. I truly believe her, and she was doing what she thought was right. However, she was called out by Diddy's defense attorneys for changing her story multiple times, and she admitted it. She's like, "Yeah, my story has changed because my memory has changed." And the human memory is just, it's not reliable. However, the government, excuse me, made sure to say, well, Miss Richard, her memory has changed because she worked so hard to suppress a lot of these bad memories, which is true. And now, with therapy and with meeting with us, she was able to recover a lot of these. And that's why they've changed. So again, it's all based on what you believe. But I also I don't want to blame her lawyers, but her lawyers didn't seem to prep her a lot on her civil lawsuit. I was very surprised that when they were asking her, the defense was asking her about her civil suit, she didn't seem to know much about it. And I don't want to say she was being elusive, because truly they're like, "Don't you know, this is what your lawyer demanded, and this, and this." And she's like, "No, I don't really know." And then there was another time where, I guess in the civil suit, she said something about seeing Diddy drag Cassie out of a car by the hair onto grass, and everybody saw. And they're like, "Miss Richard, isn't that not true at all?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, my lawyers made a mistake." And so you're like, "Wait, what?" But the biggest thing here was that Dawn Richard felt threatened because after she saw Diddy beat Cassie with this skillet, along with Kalina Harper, another bandmate of hers, and Kalina, they were part of this Dirty Money group before or after Danity Kane. The next day, Richard said that Diddy pulled them aside and said, "What you saw was passion. Cassie's fine." And then she said that he said, "If you tell, people tend to disappear, people go missing." Well, she didn't say that last part, the what she perceived as a death threat part, to the government until their 8th meeting. So they had met 7 times before that. She didn't say that part until the 8th meeting. And that's huge because the death threat is part of RICO. So the defense is like, "So, you just remembered the most important part essentially of your testimony just recently." And then they kind of elicited, "Well, you also called him multiple times to work with him again. When you stopped working with Bad Boy, you called him first. You tried to, just continue a relationship, and after getting a death threat." So, and then, she said she was doing it because of her bandmate wanted her to. And so there is a lot of there's a lot of good that comes in defendants spending money on a good defense, because it does. As someone who would be a juror, I'm like, "Oh, oh, oh," you know what I mean? Again, not to help the guy out, he's a total piece of crap, but poking these holes and diminishing some of the credibility when the story changes is very interesting to watch.
How many people does Diddy have on his legal team?
I think he has 8 or 9, actually. And we heard from a lawyer the other day that I had never heard of, Jonathan Bach, and I'm like, "Who are these people? They keep coming out of nowhere." I mean, and they are so strategic on who cross-examines who, and it just makes sense. So,
Let's talk about Jonathan Odeh, because he had the interview years ago, the police interview, and he was talking about the sex parties. If I'm honest, when I seen that video, I just thought a crazy man. I just thought he's on high on drugs, just talking shit. And it just goes to show about judging a book by its cover. You wouldn't believe him. You would just think, nah, bullshit. But now it seems that everything he was saying was telling the truth. Do you think he will take the stand?
I think so. I mean, I definitely would think so, because you're right. I thought the same thing. I mean, in 2018, he's talking about how he's a sex slave for Cassie and Diddy. And yeah, that is wild. But We actually saw, it was week 1, Cassie was given a binder and she had to identify all of these escorts, and she remembered a lot of their names, but a lot of the names she didn't remember. But Jonathan Odie, that story had broken a week prior. So they would show us the pictures of the escorts on the screen. I saw him and I was like, "Oh, I know who that is. I know who that is." And then we later learned what happened with him, and she said like he put his phone up like that. And then just to read in the news that like his wife said, yeah, he after he said he was broke, he bought a house, he had all this money, and then we see the NDA, and you're like, man, some people they just they got to have some better delivery here because they're telling the truth. They just sound a little kooky.
What about with the Cassie's STDs and UTIs and like sores in the mouth? Is that because Diddy was getting escorts to pee in her mouth?
So I didn't hear anything about STDs, but with the mouth sores, she testified that her mouth obviously was on a lot of oil, and it was hot, and it was on objects as well. So she did I know, she talked a lot about that. It was really sad, and she kinda said, like, she would be trying to sing in the studio, and that wouldn't necessarily happen, and then, yeah, she would talk about how she would get UTIs all the time. She would sometimes she testified to having to do a freak off on a UTI. But yeah, a horrible moment was hearing her discuss the urination, because I know the prosecutor wanted to make that just a really big point to the jury, really hammer it in just how maybe how controlling and degrading Diddy was to her, and this is coercion, excuse me. Um, but she described choking on the urine of an escort, and the government's like, "Did you want to be urinated on?" And she's like, "I don't think anyone wants to be urinated on." And then they're like, "Did Mr. Combs urinate on you as well?" And she's like, "Yes." And they're like, "Why didn't you tell them to stop?" And Cassie was just like, I'm on drugs. I'm on the floor. I can't really move, and I'm looking up and there's two grown men urinating on me. What do you want me to do?" And you're like, "All right, move on. Please move on for this poor woman." Like,
In 2018, did Cassie accuse Diddy of rape?
so she did. She accused him of rape after they went to dinner, and she said they had a good dinner, and he drove her home and he followed her in, and she claimed he was trying to get her to go to Burning Man because that's something they did often, and then he raped her on her living room floor, and she said she was crying, and she said stop, and then he just got up and left. And then they had asked her, were you intimate with him? The government asked this is during direct. Were you intimate with him after this rape? And she said, yeah, I was, about a month later after a friend's birthday. And they said, why? And she said, well, you can't just turn off these feelings. It's more complicated. However, when she was being cross-examined, they questioned the time because she said August of 2018, and in her civil suit, it said September of 2018, and this was supposedly after Burning Man. And then we saw text messages where Cassie was giving Diddy heart emojis after this alleged rape, and Diddy said something like, I know I didn't turn you on the other night. I've fallen off, or something like that. And she didn't really say anything. It wasn't I don't remember exactly what was said, but it was kind of just like a regular conversation. So the rape was definitely that was in question. However, Cassie, when being during the redirect, she said there was no doubt in her mind that she was raped.
Yeah, but you know yourself, the defense with going back a month later, 2 months later, and having sex again, like it doesn't look good either. Like it's all it's all on the fence for me. Like there's arguments for both sides. So many arguments. Like Diddy has got a defense, and you do feel for Cassie, 19 years old and being brainwashed, and a man has abused his power. He was nearly 40, I believe, or 36, 37, and it's sad to see that, but they still have a defense, and it doesn't mean it will be interesting how it all plays out. What about, is it Don Richards from, what's it? Yeah, is it Danity Kane?
Yeah, that's who I talked about with, her testimony got I felt like it unfortunately she kind of got ripped apart.
Yeah, because I interviewed Big Gene, who says they weren't doing what they were told. So he says that Diddy threatened them with his soldiers to go and rape them.
Oh,
That's what,
she didn't say that. She didn't. That's the thing.
yeah,
I
heavy.
mean, if that was true, she would have said that. If they are getting testimony from assistants that say he got in my face and he yelled at me, like then they would know from Dawn that he said that. So I don't believe he said that if Dawn didn't. I mean, or maybe she wasn't there, but wouldn't that be something that you would remember? Come on. Yeah.
I'll send you the clip. I don't think he says it in front of the girls. He says it in front of the men. Yeah, I'll send you the clip because it makes sense now that it's a possibility for him to say that I'm going to get these girls. I'll send my soldiers to rape all them and show them who's the boss or something. Fucking crazy.
Believe that. Okay, I believe that if he said that to others, but I'm just sitting here thinking like Dawn would have said that because that would be the most traumatic thing ever to have to hear. My God, I would be like, all right,
Yeah.
I'm out of here. Like, what?
And what about like Kim Porter and Brittany Murphy? Have they been mentioned?
Kim Porter
Obviously-
is mentioned a lot because the defense's whole argument here, or part of their defense, is that these women were jealous. Cassie specifically jealous of Kim Porter. So Kim has been brought up a lot. Brittany Murphy, why do you think Brittany Murphy would be brought up exactly?
Well-
I mean, I know what you're alluding to, but in court, I
well-
guess. Yeah.
But he was friends with Ashton Kutcher. Brittany Murphy died the same death as Kim Porter. Ashton Kutcher was also married to Demi Moore at the time while having an affair with Brittany Murphy. So it just seems, like I say, there's a lot of darkness around this man. Like I'm just speculating and going with what others tell me. But to die of the same death, and Brittany Murphy's partied with P. Diddy also, so it is weird. Obviously, they won't get mentioned because they've never been mentioned so far. This is just social media talk and people who I interview. But could they get mentioned later along the line, or is it just more the sex trafficking and the drugs? And could other charges come along the way?
Well, I mean, sure. I think that it's always possible. I think it would be very hard at this point to add any other charges. Very, very hard. I don't think Brittany Murphy is necessarily going to get mentioned. I agree. I've actually looked into her death for quite some time. I interviewed Simon Monjack's mother, Dr. Cyril Wecht. And I worked with a pathologist to go through Kim Porter's autopsy quite recently. And a lot of commonalities there, just as a side note, is that while it's all very strange, and Brittany Murphy has some other factors that led to her death, like anemia, but mainly it's the whole celebrity thing where they don't get the treatment that they need because they don't actually go to a doctor or to a hospital. They call these at-home doctors that just kind of put band-aids on the issue. And, Kim Porter had horrible pneumonia. Her lungs were like fuzzy yellow, and she's getting massages like the same day. So it's like if both of these women would have went to the hospital, I believe they would be alive. Now, Brittany is different. The Simon Monjack thing, I don't know what the hell to make sense. Both dying of the same thing a few months apart. I don't know. But anyway, I don't see Brittany Murphy coming up in this per se. We have heard Britney Spears come up, and that came up because Diddy invited Britney Spears to Cassie's, I think it was her 21st birthday in 2007 in Vegas. And now the funny thing about that, or the connection there, is that Cassie's birthday was the night before Britney's infamous, horrible 2007 performance of Gimme More, when she's in the black sequin like bikini and she appears really out of it. Do you remember that?
Mhm.
Yeah. So she was with Diddy the night before at Cassie's birthday in Vegas, and the next day she's a zombie on stage.
What about Justin Bieber? Because we've all seen the videos now and it seems very off. He was a young kid, 14, 15. A man would never say to a kid, you're spending 48 hours with and we'll do this and do that. Like, it just seems a bit creepy. Are we just speculating with Justin Bieber? Looks as if he's really fell off now. It's really sad what that kid is battling. I don't know if maybe the court case has made him go that way, but you'll tend to see a lot of the big celebrities, your Michael Jacksons, your Prince. Like, it's just not normal, and they do tend to really slip with drink and drugs. But could he be mentioned, Justin Bieber? Could he be a witness? Or Is there any more came out about him with those videos from back in the day?
I mean, he actually made a statement very recently saying he wasn't a victim of Diddy's. I would think that if he was subpoenaed in this case, he wouldn't be able to make a statement like that. So I'm going to go ahead and speculate that he won't be called at all. But that doesn't mean that he wasn't interviewed by the government. The government talked to a lot of people before, again, they've been investigating for almost 2 years. So I'm sure at one point they talked to him. But if I had to guess, I would say he can't make a statement like that if he's about to go on the stand.
Even though they never found any CCTV, do you think Diddy still has that for leverage over other names in case they want to come forward?
That's tough. I mean, when we first heard about victim 4 not being found and her lawyers weren't answering calls either, my brain went to a place where if your lawyer isn't answering the phone, that's weird. That could mean your lawyer might know something that went down and your lawyer's like, I don't want to be a part of this. Where did somebody pay Gina off? And again, I know nothing. I am just speculating, whatever. But if a lawyer had any type of knowledge about that, that would be why they're like, oh, I'm out of here. But yeah, I mean, when Diddy was jailed, he was accused of witness intimidation and trying to get to these people. And I would think that he and his team, or they would make sure that he doesn't do this because witness intimidation, that could be another charge. And I think that that's like 8 years minimum or something like that. So I would hope that's all done. But who knows? We don't know what they have of his devices yet. We just don't. We've only heard about Cassie's devices.
And what about Suge Knight when they says Diddy and his bodyguards went to the safe and got guns? For me, Suge Knight was a gangster. He was a scary man. I don't look at Diddy as a gangster or a bad boy. I've never seen that kind of reputation from him. He's obviously abused his power with his wealth, but I don't see him as a gangster or someone who would get a gun and go and shoot someone like Suge Knight. Do you think that was more shown off at a party, maybe in front of the girls? How much truth is it that Diddy got guns from the safe with his bodyguards to go and see Suge Knight?
Well, I mean, Diddy, if you go back to the 1999 Club New York shooting where Shine took the fall, that was all Diddy. And that's, I mean, legally, in the court of law, no, it was Shine, but it was Diddy. He is a gangster. The Tupac quad shooting, I believe that was Diddy. I believe that was 1994, the quad shooting. Why is it that Diddy and his team, were in the same building and nothing happened to them? It doesn't make sense. So I disagree with you. I think that he has had a gangster type of reputation. Now, what we know about, but I also agree, Suge. I mean, come on, like it's Suge Knight here, and he's in jail for, in my opinion, an indisputable reason for running people over with his car. I mean, come on, but this incident, we've now heard it a few times on the stand by Cassie and by David James, who actually was in the car. And what I thought was so interesting about this when David James was testifying about what happened with Suge is that Diddy's defense attorneys kept saying like, and it was Diddy, or no, I'm sorry, it was David James and D-Rock that first went to Mel's Diner to pick up cheeseburgers, and this was just a directive by Diddy, and that's when D-Rock saw Suge, and he gets out of the passenger seat. David James is driving, and Suge is in the passenger seat. And D-Rock's like, hey, Suge, what's up? And Suge doesn't recognize him at first. And D-Rock says, I'm Biggie's boy. And he says, or David James says that Suge said, what are you doing out here in LA? And D-Rock says, making money. And it is kind of funny, like, David James is in the passenger seat. The car is running. The Suge's car is over here. And then right? D-Rock's on the other side. And the defense is like, so you heard all this from the... And it is funny to think about, like, how do you hear the whole conversation? He claims he heard the whole conversation. So they leave it at that. Pleasantries, they park. They go inside for cheeseburgers. It's glass. And then D-Rock claims that he sees 4 SUVs pull up on every corner of the parking lot. And then he sees somebody hand Suge a gun. And then he kind of freaks out. And he's like, yo, we got to go. We got to go tell Puff. So they race back to the house. This is all according to David James. And then they tell Puff, and he's in the driveway arguing with Cassie. And Puff tells them to get in another car. This is tinted windows, a black SUV. They were in a silver one before. David James is driving, D-Rock in the front, Puff in the back with 3 guns on his lap. And they drive back to Mel's. Not there. Nobody's there. They drive around looking for Suge. They don't find him. They come home, and that's that. And then David James said, he quit after that. He freaked out. But, that's essentially all that happened, or that's all that we've heard. And when Dawn Richard testified too, she said she saw Diddy with a gun in his back pocket. But then the defense is like, so you worked for him for 2003 or 4 to 2011. How many times did you see him with a gun? Well, 3. Did you ever see him wave it around? No. Did you ever see him shoot it? No. You just saw it in his back pocket? Yes. However, I see how that could be very intimidating.
Yeah, for me, like Diddy, Tupac, I don't see them as gangsters. I don't see that viciousness. I think they've became so involved with that life, they've bought into being gangsters. Like Suge Knight, I see as a proper bad man. Puffy, I think, who's tried to convince people he's a bad man, but with his demeanour, he's just not. Like I say, if he likes getting semen rubbed in his nipples, for me, he's someone very confused. But what about... Yeah, well, everything... Listen, we're living in a day and age, everything comes out, but what about JLo? Obviously, with that night in that nightclub and guns being fired. And the thing about the Kamala Harris, when she was running for president, and all JLo's and Beyonce's, and they were crying on stage, there's a conspiracy theorist. It just seems as if, have they been sent there to promote something to then fly under the radar, or is it just one of those things that they were supporting her? But with the JLo situation, she seems to know a lot more about this than what meets the eye. Would you agree?
I wonder about JLo because she does not seem like the typical woman that Diddy would date after kind of hearing what we've heard so far. I am so interested in what she has to say. And at first, I was like, oh, there's no way they're going to call her. The government would have teased something in the opening statement. But then, they didn't tease anything about Kid Cudi, really. So they could call JLo. I mean, they totally could. And I mean, I'm wondering here because, JLo wasn't even called during the 1999 trial. And allegedly, Diddy told her to put the gun in her purse. And Cassie said the same thing, by the way. Diddy at one point had her put a gun in her purse. Those are 2 statements that seem to corroborate, which could tie to a RICO. I mean, so I have to wonder, but I'm dying to know what JLo knows. Dying.
What about Jay-Z and Beyonce? Like, as much as Diddy has all these friends, no one has ever came forward to say he's innocent. That doesn't look good.
That's true. You're absolutely right. And I don't know the answer to that because he is accused of sex trafficking. He's accused of racketeering, and perhaps they've seen things behind closed doors, some of this deviant behavior, and they just don't want to be associated with it. And perhaps they've been advised by their publicists to just keep quiet at this point. But you're right. It doesn't look good. I mean, it's just such a tough place for a lot of these celebs to be in because what they usually go towards when they're giving interviews and they're asked about it is they just kind of gravitate towards he gives so much to charity. He does so much good for the Black community. Okay, well, multiple things can be true. You're not denying anything. Oh, he would never do that. That's not him. I'm so surprised. It's all like he does so much good. He's such a good dad. Okay, well,
That's the thing, because if that's your boy, man, if that's your brother, you're defending him to the fucking hill. Guilty or not guilty, man, if you've got love and support, you're going with him. But no one has done that. No one has showed any loyalty. And that must show a lot about his character. Maybe a lot of people want him away because of the dark stuff that he's done. What about DJ Khaled? Has he been mentioned?
No, not at all. And we don't, we don't have a witness list at all. So, and generally the witness lists are available, but we are, we're kind of hearing at the end of the day, like I kind of mentioned, if you scurry out and leave quickly, you won't really hear who's coming up. So we're not going to know anything until probably the week of who is testifying.
How long will this trial be going on? Do you know?
Yes. So actually, on Thursday, May 22nd, the judge asked the government, I promised the jury this would be over by July 4th. Do you have any reason to believe that it won't be, or can it go a bit quicker? And they said, no, we're going to take 7 weeks. And then the defense for their case in chief. And then the defense said they're going to take about a week for their case in chief. So it's going to be 8 weeks. I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
Are we expecting any names to be coming forward? Any big names?
Like I said, we don't know. We know for next week, it's going to be Capricorn Clark, one of Diddy's assistants. And she was also the head of marketing at one point as well for his companies. She was very good friends with Cassie, but I suspect that we're gonna know a lot more about how his businesses operated from Capricorn and a lot more about his behavior. She was around for a lot of it, and she was also the employee that he allegedly kidnapped when he went to break into Kid Cudi's house. She's the one that called Kid Cudi and Cassie from Kid Cudi's driveway when Diddy and an associate were inside. So I suspect she's going to have a pretty explosive testimony this coming Tuesday.
And who is Kid Cudi for people who don't know? Because he testified he think Diddy blew up his Porsche and stuff. Like, who is Kid Cudi and how important is his evidence?
Well, Kid Cudi is a very well-known hip hop artist in the United States, and a lot of people knew about his car being blown up. This had been kind of a rumor for a long time. He never came out and confirmed it. Cassie even talked about it in her civil suit. But Kid Cudi and Cassie dated when Diddy and Cassie were on again, off again. And Diddy found out. And Kid Cudi described being a little confused because Cassie kind of said, no, we're done. And again, the defense, Brian Steele, who also was Young Thug's attorney, he elicited Kid Cudi to essentially say, which is a win for the defense, he said, well, you and Mr. Combs felt very played by Cassie. You felt very much like, she played you. And he kind of said, yes, twice. So, yeah, when he found out, there was he allegedly broke into his house, although there was no signs of forced entry. His door was open. He put his dog in a bathroom, and then he opened some Chanel Christmas presents that were for his family, but he didn't steal anything. Nothing was out of place. It was more like a threat or like a scare tactic. And Kid Cudi's like, what the hell, called the cops, filed this police report, and Diddy kept reaching out to him, wanting to talk, and Kid Cudi was ignoring him. And then Cassie actually ended up breaking up with Kid Cudi in December of 2011. She said she was nervous. She felt uncomfortable, and she kind of went back to Diddy. And a month later, January 2012, Kid Cudi gets a Molotov cocktail thrown in his car, and it's on fire. We saw pictures of it, and he files another police report. And we actually find out through the defense that there were female fingerprints or DNA taken from the evidence on the scene. And so, I mean, he was very credible, in my opinion, but I also know that we're going to hear from someone in the LAPD and the LAFD next week, because I think it's going to come down to these police reports and these, did he say his name? Did he say, I think Sean Combs did this? Or is this just this happened to my car, this happened to my house? No idea. And then, the defense is going to have a field day.
What you thinking now? How you seen the case going? You think it's a bit balanced, or do you think it's more in favour for Diddy to get a guilty?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask that. I think it's too early to tell. I really do. If I had to guess right now, I would say 12 jurors would not find him guilty on 2 counts of sex trafficking. Right now, day 9, 2 counts of jurors, 2 counts, sorry. 12 jurors would not agree on a racketeering charge. 12 I don't think so. I think 12 could possibly right now agree on engage to or transportation to engage in prostitution. But it's so early, so I don't know. But again, you've got to find 12 people to unanimously agree. I, and these jurors, like 3 of them are under 40. They skew on the older demographic. So
Lauren, it's going to be interesting how it plays out. For giving me your time today, I thoroughly enjoyed that. It's to give people an inside bit of information of what's going on. I'll have you back on in a couple of weeks to get another update, if you don't mind. You've done some amazing work. Obviously, not just this case, which we'll get into hopefully in the future. But for now, listen, thank you. And would you like to finish up on anything else?
no, I I think we covered it. But like I said, it's so early. I hate guessing, but I also know it's just really hard to get 12 people to agree on something unless it's just, an open and shut case, which this isn't. I think we all thought it would be. It's not.
Yeah, that's what makes it so interesting for then people to get. Listen, it's getting spoke about everywhere. But for giving me your time, Lauren, I thoroughly enjoyed that. Keep up the amazing work and stay in touch so we can keep everyone updated again. Have a great weekend, Lauren, and I wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, James.